Avengers!
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Talking Smack, where we talk superheroes, movies, animation, and comics. I am your host, Josh Scar, and joining me this week is Alex, who remembered to take a drink before we started recording. Alex, how you doing?
I need my coffee. It's late. It's so late for me.
It is very late. I am usually in bed by like 8:30, and it is almost 10 at this point. But it is worth it because we are joined by 2/3 of the I Have Some Notes crew, which is an amazing podcast and one of my favorite podcasts. We have Gregg and Liam here. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for making the time to be here. Please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about yourselves before we get started here.
I'm Gregg Beaver. I'm the producer of I Have Some Notes. I Have Some Notes is a podcast where we punch up mediocre Hollywood movies. That's a good time.
Yeah, and I am Liam Creswick. I am one of the other co-hosts of I Have Some Notes, where we punch up mediocre movies. And I guess I'm also on another podcast called Quantum Kickflip, which is an actual play podcast where we play a game called Slug Blaster, designed by an Edmonton game designer.
Fun. And as an active listener of I Have Some Notes, I can say definitively that it is a good time, and I love the discussion you guys have. At time of recording, you just released a 2022 wrap up, and I believe your last episode before that was Frozen.
Was it Frozen or was it
Last Night in Soho.
Last Night
in Soho. That's right. That was I watched that while I was on the road this year, and I remember comparing it to a movie, but it's become such a forgettable movie to me that I couldn't even remember what I was like. Oh, this is basically this.
That's fair. It's not Edgar Wright's most memorable movie.
Indeed. I also listened to your guys' best of the year wrap up. I forget which one of you was the It Takes Two fan. Had to sneak that one in there.
Alex.
Oh, so good. My partner and I played through that as well this year, even though it came out last year. So I'm gonna just endorse that game recommend from your best of episode.
Huzzah. Thank you. And I would like to thank you all for being so professional. You actually have titles. Josh just locks me in his basement. So I'm not a producer. I am just the social media troll in the basement.
Yeah, I'm the producer, editor, host. Alex just does the social media news for us, and then occasionally sometimes hosts on the podcast.
Well, the illusion of being a professional is the most important thing in podcasting, I think.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons we keep Scott around, because he's got that deep radio voice.
Oh yeah, I love the way he introduces himself every week. I'm Scott C. Bourgeois. So we are here to talk about Legasequels, which are movies that have come out 10 plus years after the original movie. But before we dive into that with Gregg and Liam, we're going to take a quick ad break from our friends at Sugar Coated Murder, and we'll be right back.
Hey, Ann Varner.
Hey, Karen Beatty.
We need a promo. You know, like where we talk about what we do on our podcast.
On our Sugar Coated Murder podcast? Like how we love to bake and talk about murder?
That's what we need to talk about.
There you go.
I think we've talked about it. Y'all find us on all your favorite listening apps.
Stay sweet.
And don't murder.
Because if you kill people,
we will talk about you.
And we are back to talk about Legasequels with Gregg and Liam from the I Have Some Notes podcast, along with myself and Alex. And we're going to kind of just dive right into this because the main topic is not necessarily talking about individual movies, but we can bring them up in ways to talk about their successes or their failures. But like, what makes a Legasequel work? Because we're coming out of 2022, which just had Top Gun Maverick come out and made $1.4 billion over like a 6-month theater run, which hasn't happened in a long time. So, I mean, let's just
shocking everyone, I think.
Let's just kind of open this up to the floor and like, what are some of your favorite Legasequels and what do you think makes them work?
Right off the bat, I gotta say I had not heard the portmanteau Legasequels until today, and I'm very charmed by it. So I don't know if you came up with that or if that's been around, but I love it.
As far as I'm aware, it was coined by Nick Mason of the Weekly Planet podcast.
Thankfully, I trademarked it. You guys owe me a quarter every time you say it. So that's the important part here. So please
But you have to
continue
remember,
using the
he's in my
phrase.
basement, so to get to the ATM, he has to pay me some royalties to get out.
Ah! No,
Well,
we
we're only
forget
going to
that.
be paying you in Canadian quarters, so it won't be all that fantastic for you.
Yeah, but it's fun to say loonies.
Yeah.
Yeah, what makes a good Legasequel work? What are our favorites?
Maybe start with
Lately
Top Gun
they've
because sorry, go ahead, Liam. Sorry.
no go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say maybe start with Top Gun because I think that's sort of like an interesting example of a legacy sequel doing like working, but also not working. Top Gun works because it does deliver something that audiences haven't seen in a very long time, which is some real practical filming. You know, throwing all those actors into the jets and just tossing them around, to which I'm sure many of them had lost their lunch several times because it looked it looked horrifying. Like you really you get such a great sense of physicality and speed the way that they filmed it. And you know, obviously famously the original Top Gun, they had uh, filmed a lot of, you know, all the jets practically as well. I don't think they got into the cockpits quite as much, but it was something that, you know, gave people a reason to go to the theaters and see it. And I think it also had the benefit of word of mouth. Like after a few people had seen it, you're like, oh, you just have to see these action scenes because they're incredible. On the flip side, like the film itself, when you break down the plot, which is more or less a carbon copy of the original, which is what I dislike about what I consider to be sort of like a bad sequel. And it also is fairly empty in terms of like its character development. It sort of subsists on this high octane action alone, which is fair enough. Like you can have a good movie like that, but I think it's interesting how Top Gun sort of like bridges that gap between what I would probably consider what makes a legacy sequel work, delivering something different, and what I consider it not working, which is like trying to do the same but different.
Yeah, the same but different, I think, is the lesson to be learned from sequels, be they Legasequels or this movie came out and now we've got to crank one out in 9 months to capitalize on the energy sequels, or just a good proper 2 or 3 years. Yeah, all sequels really do need to walk that line of doing what we expect, delivering the goods, but not doing something new, justifying their existence. And the shelf life of a Legasequel doesn't necessarily improve it one way, or like they're not Scotch, they don't necessarily age. Some do, some it's like, no, you guys probably should have made the sequel. Like Zoolander 2 comes to mind,
Oh
of one
no.
where it's like, why did you wait a decade for this? It couldn't be cool. Whereas Avatar in theaters now, it's like, that's kind of cool that we had to wait a decade to get this thing again. It isn't the kind of thing they can crank out like Harry Potter movies.
See, Zoolander, I find an interesting point because the first one, I unabashedly just love that movie. It is so bizarre in how timely it was with all its mockery of how things are going. Because, you know, phones were getting a lot smaller, so we had a super microphone and not understanding how computers work as they were becoming the internet and computers were becoming very invasive in households and the celebration of fashion. And then you had Zoolander 2, which should have worked in many ways because it was still Ben Stiller who was coming off of, I mean, he had his, what I consider probably his magnum opus, which would be Tropic Thunder. But then he was kind of just settling into the Meet the Fockers movies and looking at the Night in Museum stuff, and he's like, oh, okay, I kind of need a surefire thing. Let's crank up Zoolander 2. And it was just a whiff. Like nothing worked. And I think part of the reason why that works is one of my complaints about Lego sequels is they don't understand that people change. They think that to recapture the magic of the original, that they have to solidify the person where they were in the middle of movie A is where they have to endure and exist in movie B. They don't look at the end of movie A and say this person has changed, grown, this is the new person. They revert them.
Hmm.
If you
Oh
look
yeah,
at
yeah.
so if you look at something like Bad Santa and Bad Santa 2, it is the exact same problem. They don't give Willie any change, any difference. The kid is the exact same kid that he was, even though he's now an adult, and they even went back and got the same actor. I think that actor had only done like Bad Santa and now is doing Bad Santa 2. They have all these issues with letting characters age, develop, and grow, and instead there's just reversion.
Yeah, and I think it's a problem with movies, because I know sitcom and television, that's central to the writing process. I use the story circle, Dan Harmon's story circle, a lot in improv that I direct, because I think it's just a better version of the Joseph Campbell hero's journey. And the thing I keep trying to reiterate is, like, you got to go through your arc, and you said it right, like the you at the end is the new you at the beginning of the next episode, you being the character. Even Marvel movies, even Harry Potter movies, where they know they're going to make a dozen of them, are still meant to be these like singular things that I just don't know if they're always thinking about that, how to tell a story without reverting back to square one, right?
Oh yeah, you can definitely tell with like Thor, between Ragnarok to Infinity War and Endgame, and then into Thor: Love and Thunder. He's got four different character arcs going on in four different movies that none of them really quite mesh. Like Infinity War and Endgame are a little more cohesive because they were written as a single story, but it's still very different because Thor is dealing with like PTSD and depression, where uh in Infinity War he's just dealing with like a revenge plot. And to the point of going with the same but different, there are a few movies that I shared this list with you guys earlier, where it's a Lego sequel, but it's kind of rebooting the franchise in a way as well. You have movies like Creed, where it's basically Rocky all over again, but they change it enough that it feels fresh because it's now about a family legacy. It's about finding your own individuality within that legacy, and like Ghostbusters Afterlife as well, where
Hmm.
it's again embracing yourself and your family kind of learning to love who you are for who you are, not the idea of who they think you should be. So there's a lot of good stuff in that, the same but different. But on the flip side of that, which Alex and I kind of talked privately before you guys joined us, The Force Awakens kind of does that in a different way for me, where it's resetting to the status quo and then just kind of retelling the story from A New Hope with new characters. And that just feels, after this is the highest grossing domestic movie of all time at almost $1 billion at the US alone. And yet I'm like 7 years later, I'm sitting here thinking, how? Like I get it because it's Star Wars and it's exciting and it's new. I remember in 1999, I sat through 5 showings of The Phantom Menace because it was new Star Wars and it was amazing. And it's like, I get it, but having time to think about it, like the Wrath Tar scene alone, I'm like, this is completely pointless. Why is this in the movie? It's because you needed a garbage pit scene, and this is what they came up with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
comparing that to Creed, I think is a really interesting one, because they're both, the gestalt is the same, the vibe is the same, and yet wildly different results.
I think J.J. Abrams might be. This might be a little bit too insulting, but he seems like the most soulless director around, at least as far as his filmography is concerned. Maybe not his television work. Uh, but the way that he's rebooted both Star Wars and Star Trek, right? And the way that he's done it has felt so calculating, uh, to to best suit the product of Star Wars and or Star Trek, that it feels like a little insulting when you're done watching the film, right? Um, Force Awakens was fun and it had a lot of energy, and the same goes for the reboot of Star Trek. But at the end of the day, when you think about like how hard they worked to please the audience rather than giving us something new and interesting that we might not have known we wanted, which is kind of the gold standard for any sequel, as far as I'm concerned. Like that
Yeah.
wasn't really in the conversation for them. That's not what they were interested in doing. They were interested in creating something that the old fans would come out for in droves, as well as pleasing the general audience. And that was like they were going full four quadrant. You know.
Yeah. And also I feel like some of these are more franchises. I think we were trying to like we were talking about movies where it's like one and then a decade goes by and there's another, like Way of the Water, right?
Yeah.
Because when you get into franchise talk, it's a whole other bag of worms. So
Two movies that have come out fairly recently that I think tried to do the template of we're going to ignore everything that happened beforehand and other than the original and continue would be Halloween, which came out in 2017, which ignored all the sequels and was basically like, hey, listen, we're going to do, Michael Myers is back. We're going to have the kids. Laurie Strode is still around. And I thought that movie really worked because they took the Laurie Strode at the end of the movie and gave her PTSD, some issues. Apparently, she briefly had a love affair or a marriage and fell apart and all this stuff. And now she's a crazy old lady who lives in the woods. And I thought that movie really worked because of the respect of the original and trying to track a cohesive journey of what was coming.
mm-hmm.
But then you have Netflix's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in which Leatherface is there. Apparently, after the end of the first movie, he got adopted and lives in an orphanage in this kind of abandoned town. And it tries to have some kind of message about media because it's a bunch of like young influencers who are trying to go in and gentrify it by literally buying a town in Texas. And then Sally, the survivor from the original, they tried a very similar thing. She apparently became a Texas Ranger. She's been looking for Leatherface for 45, 50 years. And then she, of course, shows up screaming at Leatherface, I know, like, I knew you would come back. And they tried the exact same thing, but it didn't work. They took the template and just failed in every execution of trying to deliver respect for the original property, gruesome kills, interesting action, and a story about your past coming to haunt you. And it's really just interesting just to look at both of those movies and go, this worked. Wow, this did not.
I have to imagine that creating maybe not just a sequel, but a legacy sequel for a horror movie has to be exceedingly difficult to come at it in a new and interesting way, because most horror movies have some kind of hook that's really intrinsic to that film and that has touched the audience's imagination in some big way. And most horror sequels end up being like, well, here's that hook, and then here's some more interesting kills. So to revamp a horror movie in a way that comes at it in a much different way and justifies its existence by being something new and fresh and different, I have to imagine that might be the genre that's the most difficult to get that done.
Speaking of horror movie Legasequels, through the research that I did trying to just find notable Legasequels, Doctor Sleep came up, which is a movie I haven't seen because I'm a big scaredy cat and I don't watch horror movies. So like having a movie come out almost 40 years after The Shining as a sequel to The Shining, I haven't seen it, so I have no frame of reference for it. But what did you guys think of Doctor Sleep if you have seen it?
Can't say I have. The Shining's one of those perfect movies. I'm a big Stanley Kubrick fan that I'm like, I don't need anyone to follow up with. Though I could be wrong because that's what I said about Blade Runner 2049 and was like, oh, wait, I'm an idiot. This movie's great and Danny Villeneuve's a genius. So maybe I should give Dr. Sleep a try.
Give it a shot. it is a weird movie in that there are moments where you can probably feel Stephen King leaning over the writer director's shoulder and going, I don't like the movie The Shining. But he somehow bridges making Doctor Sleep, which is a sequel to the book, and the book was maybe, I don't even know if it was a template for Kubrick. If so much it was like he went, there's a hotel, okay, cool,
Got it.
yeah, and I get to torture the actors, perfect. But he somehow bridges making Stephen King happy and also respecting the Shining movie and its enduring legacy of perfection. I went into Doctor Sleep. I'm not the biggest Ewan McGregor fan. I don't really get why people love him as much as they do, other than apparently there's an entire generation of children that finds it endearing that he said hello there at one point in the Star Wars movie. But I was watching this and it worked for me. There's something about that it doesn't really become a Shining sequel into the last 35 minutes that actually works. And I think he did enough reverence to it. And then, of course, he completely changes the ending from what Stephen King's book did. So that makes me happy as hell.
A
Because
small
apparently.
future I have some notes episode.
Yeah, maybe. There's a couple on this list we had where I'm like, I can see us doing that down the road. One of the things I've noticed that kind of keeps coming up as we're all talking about our sort of take on what makes a Legacy sequel good, what does it need? Greg kind of touched on early on of like its justification for existing. Like, what was the impetus to relaunch this in the first place? And as I sort of like looked at the list we had compiled of these, I'm like, oh, that one's good, that one's bad, that one's kind of good, that one's bad, that one's good. It really does seem like it's the ones where the person making it, whether it was the original cast or crew or new people, or some combination thereof, an enthusiasm to do something unique and original with material that is aged well, or at least a premise and a concept that it is aged well. I think the best example of that is Mad Max Fury Road, where it has a lot in common with the Mad Max movies and also not a lot in common with the other Mad Max movies, and is very timely, very relevant to the world we live in. Clearly, George Miller had something he wanted to do, didn't need Mel Gibson to do it, and the results are brilliant. Whereas the flip side is something like Tron Legacy, which we did on I Have Some Notes. And yeah, it's heartless. It's a soulless movie that's just a bunch of CGI where some outsider goes to a fantastic place and they gotta change over the regime of power and authority to save the oppressed people of this world, and then head back home. Couldn't be more boilerplate of a premise or a story, and they literally just slapped the Tron style over top of a movie we've all seen 1,000 times because Disney needed something to sell that particular month in theaters, and Tron was on the shelf available to be rebooted, right? Like, how fast did that movie come and go? Like, there's been no more Tron movies. Nobody talks about that movie unless you're us, for some reason. And so I think I really just like the intent behind why that thing is getting remade. Is it because the artists involved have something they want to say with the material, or were they just trying to like fill a quarter's quota of movies to be made, and bankable names are bankable names,
I
the
have
artist
to-
has a grudge.
Yeah, no.
To,
Wait.
like a score to settle, like in the case of Lana Wachowski with
Yeah,
the
that's-
Matrix Resurrections, right?
Yeah, Matrix Resurrections.
I have some notes for you.
Well
Tron
done.
Legacy.
Okay.
Thank you. Tron Legacy. How dare you? That soundtrack is amazing.
Oh, the sound. No, did I say anything about the soundtrack? That it slaps
and I will
on its
have you
own.
know,
Absolutely.
it did have a brief run as a Disney Channel cartoon as a sequel, and Jared
Fair.
Leto keeps threatening he's going to make a sequel. That being said, there is one moment. I mean, I understand everything you're saying about Tron Legacy. And by the way, we're going to get back to Resurrections because how dare you?
Mhm.
But there is a moment in Tron Legacy. There's one scene that I will go back and constantly rewatch because I think that scene is the entire reason why he filmed the movie. It is the part of the movie where not David Tennant, his friend from he does all the
From Good Omens.
yes, the Good Omens guy, crud, Kate Beckinsale's ex, Martin something. Dang it, what is his name? Anyway,
Martin Sheen. There we
yes,
go.
thank you, Martin Sheen.
Or Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen, thank you,
Michael Sheen. Yeah, not Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
Different guy.
Boy Flynn.
Not
Yeah,
related.
Boy Flynn goes into Michael Sheen's dance studio. You see Daft Punk briefly. A fight scene breaks out where they're trying to, beat up Boy Flynn because he's a user, and you get the amazing music. I will rewatch this scene, and I've sent it to Josh, God knows how many times, and a bunch of people, of one perfect moment in cinema where the music fades down, the fight is starting to go, go down, go away, the lights dim, and you see him, oh, crap, I forget his name, but you see him enter the room, and they don't show him at first. They show all the programs kneeling to him as he comes through.
Jeff
Yes,
Bridges.
Jeff Bridges, whatever his character's name is not Tron. Tron's the other person. And you see everybody kneel to him. The lighting is perfect. The music's perfect. They're in reverence of this person that they've heard forever come to them. And he comes in. He grabs, Boy Flynn. He grabs Cora. They begin to leave.
sorry, I have to interrupt. You remember the son's name,
Yes.
Flynn. You can't remember Jeff Bridges' character's name,
No.
Flynn.
Yep. And they begin to leave, and it's all these people who are falling to their knees that this person has graced their presence, and it is the perfect encapsulation of a Messiah moment. That is something I would have loved to have seen. I would have loved to have seen that at all replicated in the Star Wars sequels with Luke. And the only time we got that is in Boba Fett season 2, the final episode, where Moff Gideon is staring at the screen and he realizes a Jedi's coming for him.
I think you're hallucinating, thinking Boba Fett's going to get a season
Oh, sorry,
2.
The Mandalorian season 2.
I will say this for Tron Legacy, it does justify its existence in one way, which is being a visual masterpiece outside of the the face replacement stuff. It really takes the ideas of the look of Tron from the original 80s movie, which doesn't look great today. I mean, visually impressive for the time that it was created, but it really just took that little kernel of something cool and just dialed it up to 11, and it just looks great. And Joseph Kosinski is one of these commercial directors to film director type guys, and I think he's had a pretty interesting journey as a filmmaker, because he's made a lot of okay movies that are just visually stunning. I recommend people watch Oblivion. It's just like a nondescript Tom Cruise movie, but boy, is it amazing to look at. And he followed that up eventually with Top Gun Maverick, the movie that we led the talk off with. He eventually took that visual style and put it to good use in a halfway decent movie, and now he's $1 billion director.
Then I guess maybe the takeaway then is the whether it worked or not, the thing that Tron did to justify its existence is the old Tron movie looks cool as hell. We can dial it up to 11. Yeah. We can make it look cool as hell. We can get Daft Punk to do the soundtrack. Is that enough to justify an otherwise boring movie? Who's to say? But I think the lesson then is what makes a legacy sequel work. Take the things that worked so well in the original. Don't lose that spirit, that gestalt, as opposed to maybe some of the nuts and bolts plot. Or hell, maybe it is the nuts and bolts plot you want, and you lose the vibe. I think it's just finding that what's important, what's the thing that has endured over the years.
Like taking it back to Resurrections, like that's it's sort of the opposite, right? Where Resurrections decided to tell like a much different story that was much more about um being about metatextual, and they almost completely forgot about what a visual footprint the original Matrix had
Right.
on the filmography, right? Where
Mm.
the Resurrections feels like it left that behind, and it was more or less like an episode of Sense8. Like visually, it didn't really too much more than that.
My problem with Resurrections that I've now settled into is my same problem that I have with Star Wars sequels, which is the same problem that I have with Harry Potter and the Cursed Child and a lot of the Lego sequels that don't work, is that, which goes back to like the original point of the characters don't grow. But not only do the characters don't grow, they destroy the characters' successes. So if you go from the end of Return of the Jedi, Luke's an all-powerful Jedi Master. He's succeeded. Leia has achieved her dream of the rebellion working. Han is becoming a good guy. All his debts are paid off because basically everyone's dead. That he has debts to pay off. He's no longer a scumbag scoundrel. And you go right into Episode 7. Luke's a failure. Leia is still now in a new rebellion, and Han is literally looking for the Millennium Falcon because he's a scumbag rebel. And you take that and you do something like Harry and the Potter and the Cursed Child, and Harry's a poor father, Hermione's an overworked a wife, Ron's a scumbag again, and then you go back and you go to like Resurrections, and it had shown that there was a peace treaty that it was done between the machines and the humans, and Zion had won. Morpheus had won. He had his belief, his faith in Neo had won. But instead, what we get is Neo and Trinity are jacked back into the Matrix. They're not together anymore. They've lost who they are completely. Morpheus, they don't even tell you what happened with Morpheus, other than he was a failure and he died, and Zion with him. And now we have this new Cold War. And that is a problem that I have, is that if you're going to make me a sequel and you left me on a good note because you finished your story, you don't destroy the characters and their successes to start over. You give them a new challenge. Like, I have
Yeah.
railed at Josh. He's heard this plenty of times, but I would have loved to see a Star Wars sequel trilogy that was about Leia as head of the Republic, Han as her husband, who's a doting good father. Luke has generations of Jedi underneath him, and something has come up that challenges them. Instead, their life for
Yeah.
30 something years has been misery.
I think that my personal issue with the way that the Star Wars trilogy played out is that I was never really clear on the linkages between the trilogies, between episode 6 and episode 7. Like it's because it just feels to me like the Empire was always around and it didn't go away at all. It didn't feel like there was any sort of like victory at all. Like you say, that sort of like suggests that it was all for nothing, which is a bit of a bummer. I will say that putting them in a position where they have to fight an evil empire again isn't necessarily the worst thing, but it's more to me about like, what the character's journey is rather than what the obstacle is. Like a lot of folks complained about where Luke was in The Last Jedi. He's given up on the Force and stuff like that, and I don't know, like to me that's a really interesting place to put Luke. Like this guy who's like he's kind of lost everything and he's losing his faith and going the other way where he's still like a wise old sage like Yoda, just more or less just repeats Empire Strikes Back again, which is not really all that interesting to me. But also it also puts Luke in just like this really interesting position where he's got to have his own journey in order to help Rey. Plot wise, I think that works, and yeah.
But that is exactly a repeat of Empire Strikes Back. Luke is by himself, a Jedi Master on an island surrounded by creatures, and he's Yoda, literally.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's it still rhymes, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a better plot surrounding it, you can get away with it a little bit better. But I think because these movies never had an overarching story that was created by a producer or a story manager, that it all just felt really messy because everyone's like, oh, I'm going to make my own version of this movie. And it falls apart. But we don't want this to devolve
Yeah,
Yeah.
into
no.
the Star Wars sequels were a big mess.
Relitigating Star Wars. Yeah, because you touched on something earlier in before we got real deep into the Star Wars of it all.
It was really hard not to dive deep into Star Wars Resistance and
It's
giving some
fair.
backstories.
That's fair. But when you were like sequels that ruin their characters' successes,
Yeah.
I thought was really interesting, and I realized there's a sequel with its own sequel that does that really well, and then on the next one screws it up, and that's Toy Story 3 does a great job of not
I
destroying
love Toy
its
Story
character
3.
successes, and then Toy Story
Oh my
4
gosh, I completely
absolutely
forget Toy
does.
Story 4 even exists.
Yeah, Toy Story 3 was such a perfect movie that made so much sense for those characters in that world. And then Toy Story 4 is like, what are we doing here? So it's just interesting that you can see that example back to back in a pair of sequels.
I actually purposely did not watch Toy Story 4 because I believe that Toy Story 3 was such a good ending for that series that I was totally uninterested in seeing them again.
Yeah, I can't say I blame you there. Backtracking a little bit, I believe Liam, you mentioned that when we were talking about Tron and like taking either like certain story beats and bringing that and updating it, or just taking like the nuts and bolts and using that and be like, this is what people want. Those are two things that really kind of stuck out to me with the list we created here with Jurassic World and Superman Returns. Those two movies really stuck out to me when you were talking about like just taking the nuts and bolts of a story and throwing it at the Legasequel to just be like, this is what you like about these movies, right? And Superman Returns is one for me that just constantly does not work because they're just trying to recreate a Christopher Reeve story or give that Superman kind of his own closure. But it's so sloppy, other than the plane catch scene, everything else in that movie just does not work.
Yeah, no, that's a big time agree. It's like you know the thing we love Lex Luthor for, his weird schemes to create expensive land. That's what we want.
And just constantly getting caught and thrown in
Yeah.
jail.
Seizing ownership of lands he didn't previously own. That's the heart of what
Having
we're doing
sex
here
with old women to acquire wealth.
Oh, it's so weird.
I think
So weird.
it's probably a good example. I think we kind of touched on this very lightly before, but a good example of a movie not understanding the times that it's living in. You know, at that point with Superman Returns, I think it was sort of like post X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff like that, right? So
Mhm.
audiences were looking for the material to be taken much more seriously, and Superman Returns kind of like wanted to go back and be that playful sort of 70s vibe, and it just wasn't working. So yeah, it's really, you know,
Mhm.
if you're making your legacy sequel, you better have a good idea of like where your fan base is at and where your audience is at.
And that's something that actually reminded me. Another thing that bothers me about this movie is that it's supposed to be 5 years after what 1981, and they have all modern technology now, and it's just like, wait, you were 1981, and now we're in 2006, but it's only been 5 years, but you have Max and modern cars. What's happening here? Like you either buy into we're going to set it back in the 80s or you make something new. Like you can't really do both in my opinion. Very early on in the podcast, I think before we took our like 2-year hiatus, Alex and I had a big debate about Jurassic World, and I still hate it and I do not understand how it made $1 billion, but we've also got like 5 Transformers movies that have made $1 billion. So like general audiences, they just enjoy what they enjoy, but Jurassic World is another one of those legacy sequels that we talked a little bit about with like Halloween, where they just kind of scrap every other sequel and just talk about the main one. And this is another one where they just took the nuts and bolts of the main thing where dinosaurs get out, people get killed, but this time we're going to kill them en masse. And the eye candy is great. Like the mosasaur is pretty cool, but overall the movie is just so shallow and hollow, and it's it just is a Lego sequel that as the sequels have shown, there's not a lot to these movies, and just the fact that they keep trying to make a franchise out of it just shows that you had the one good movie. There's not much else you can do after it. Just let it be.
Yeah, I'd say that
Yeah.
there's definitely some properties where there's not a lot of rope with your concept. Like, you can only retell dinosaurs going amok so many different ways before it starts to feel stale. And like, I guess with Jurassic World, they kind of came at it in a new direction because it was interesting to see the park open and functioning as intended. Does it justify its existence? I don't know. I feel like it kind of does enough different with the material, and takes the next evolution. The first Jurassic Park is all about humans meddling with nature and playing God, and like the humans in Jurassic World take it even further by like, the people they want something
Creating
even
hybrids.
crazier than dinosaurs. They want new dinosaurs that we just made up out of whole cloth, kind of thing. And I think it also kind of like is a an interesting comment on humanity itself, and just like in how we consume entertainment, and how much we always need bigger, better, more bombastic. And it's kind of a comment on how uh, blockbuster filmmaking has evolved in and of itself, to the point now where blockbuster filmmaking doesn't even include like comedy genres. There's no more like big comedy movie in the summer. It's just
Yeah.
all superhero shit mostly. And yeah, so I think in some ways, like
Remember
yeah.
what podcast we're on? We're on this, what S stands for.
um yeah, so it's an interesting sequel, because like like in a way it has something to say, but it also, I think I agree with you, Josh, that it's also fairly vacant and vapid for the most part, and uh treats some of its characters extremely poorly. um
Like the
so it's,
poor
yeah, it's got its
assistant who's just
problems.
dragged to her death for
Yeah,
some reason.
yeah. She's just trying to
But hey, it's
babysit some
justified
kids.
because in a deleted scene, she was a real bitch to the kids. So, that's fine.
No more than their aunt was. Hey, you guys are showing up because your parents are getting divorced. Here's a random person. Go hang out with her. Uh,
Yeah, I think there is a good movie there if they took it more into the like consumerism of the park as well. Like, obviously you need the dinosaurs to break out, but if you're gonna make a statement on something, like Jurassic Park has opened, it's been open for however long, and people are getting bored with the regular dinosaurs, and you can ride the baby Triceratops. Like, go a little bit into Shrek territory and start making some statements about, like, hey, Disney World, fun on the surface, right? Let's go a little deeper and show you how corrupt and just awful this place is. But they went all surface level and were just like, hey, look, a sponsored dinosaur. Verizon Wireless brings you the Indominus Rex.
I will say that is actually one of the parts that I actually did like about Matrix Resurrections. When they got Wednesday Addams to show up for one scene so that she could do like the whole like, okay, we want a Matrix sequel. What do people know the Matrix is for? I loved that scene because I was like,
Yeah.
what the hell am I watching? This is amazing. Unfortunately, that scene didn't carry forward to the rest of the movie, but that's fine. But at least they were letting you know what the movie was and why it was there briefly. That some corporate bigwig was like, dude, we got to reboot this IP. Which,
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
that opening sequence with all that meta stuff, that was great.
yeah,
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. You could taste Lana Wachowski's rage
oh yeah.
when you're watching that movie, and that, I think, was the funnest part of it. I think Resurrections kind of totally justifies itself in being that sort of commentary on movie studios and the whole blockbuster filmmaking biz. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's great.
it reminded me of scenes from Blazing Saddles and Tropic Thunder, in which the movies briefly divulge and divert into this I hate what I'm doing, so everybody has to suffer with me moment. Like, I have never understood the ending of Blazing Saddles. Please tell me I'm not the only one who's seen that movie.
Yeah, you're the only person who has ever seen Blazing
I meant of the
Saddles.
4 of us, Josh.
Not in my adulthood to tell you
okay.
what the ending is. Sorry.
No, it's the one hole. It's actually
Or
the
to
one
comment
hole
on
in
the
my
ending, yeah.
notebooks filmography.
Okay, well, you got to correct that tonight. It's only about 96 minutes. It's fantastic. But the movie ends with them getting into such a large fight that they spill over literally to other sound stages. And they don't explain
It's very Monty
yeah, they don't
Python.
explain why this is happening, but it happens. And then there's like
Isn't that how Marriage Story ends too?
and then in like the Tropic Thunder where they're just talking where they just are just bold faced just telling you that they're a bunch of overprivileged actors and this is the worst day of their life. It was just and you wonder like there's just and I loved that scene so much in Matrix Resurrections, and I so hoped that they were going to go like weirdly the entire movie super meta with like I really thought that that the agent was going to be actually Keanu Reeves' agent, like real life. That they were going to be like listen, guy, you got to make another one of these movies. We're going to start training you. He's like, what? We're going to teach you kung fu. It was just so weird. But there are just I don't know. You have to love the property, but also just respect the characters and at least try to respect the audience more than just think they want sugar.
And I think that's actually a great transition into skewing a bit more positive here. I know the negative stuff is really easy to dive into and really rip apart, but we did talk earlier about anyone who takes on a legacy sequel, they have to have an appreciation for either the property, the characters, or the story they're telling that involves the characters. And I think two really good ones, which we've already talked about, Creed, but Ryan Coogler just did a fantastic job resurrecting that world. But another movie that we brought up in our list here is The Color of Money, which I mean, Martin Scorsese just kind of knocked that one out of the park because who the heck really thought that a sequel to The Hustler was ever coming, let alone a good sequel was coming.
Sorry, I haven't seen it, so that's why I'm not talking.
I
Oh
haven't
man,
seen either,
I
so I
was-
can't. I
you
can't.
got a
follow
couple
up
more
on
you got to
you
add to
three.
the
I
list
was
here.
trying to remember. Is that the one Tom Cruise is in?
Yes, worst person in the world, Tom Cruise.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
But oh man, if you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it though. It is really good. It is slightly before Tom Cruise just goes completely insane.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep saying that because I don't want us to get sued.
Yeah, it's a bit now. Thanks for explaining the bit, Alex. That makes it so much
You're
more
welcome.
funny.
Damn, John Turturro's in this. Forrest Whitaker.
As
Sweet.
Johnny Carson
Yep,
always
so-
said, the bit's funnier if you explain it. No, The Color of Money is actually really good. The only problem with that movie is that they didn't say, they didn't necessarily say this is a sequel to the other movie, which you would get
True.
these days, like Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery.
Yeah. Boo.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you did not know about like the book, or in my case, I saw it on TV when I was like 12 years old, and my dad's like, "What's this?" I'm like, it's called The Color of Money." And then he pulled a couple of books off his shelf, and he's like, "Oh, hey, these are based on a novel written by Walter Tevis." And I was like, "Oh, okay." From what I understand, a lot of people did not realize at the time that it was a sequel as well until like names were dropped and everything, and like references to the previous movie, but. It is a fantastic movie on its own, and it does what a legacy sequel should do, which tells a story that is unique and also kind of carries on from where the characters were previously and continues to evolve them, which again we talked a little bit about in Creed, where Rocky is now kind of moving into the Mickey role, and he has to accept that, but he's also really lost because he's lost his wife, he's lost touch with his son. We don't really know what's going on with that because is Rocky Balboa canon? We don't know. But having a love for these these characters in these movies is definitely a big part in what I think makes a lasting legacy sequel. And I don't know where you guys fall on the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull ideal, but like that one really just felt like it they needed to make an Indiana Jones movie because the nostalgia factor, like the kids, like I was born in 1985, so I grew up watching The Last Crusade and all these other movies because they'd all just come out on VHS, and now we were all hitting our 20s, so like, oh hey, let's capitalize on this group of people becoming more
Hmm.
monetarily independent. And then they released Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where they're like, oh, we're only going to use CGI when absolutely necessary, and it's going to be just like the ones you love and grew up with. And then the first thing we see is a CGI gopher, and there's the whole monkey scene, and I could go on and on, but like,
Yeah.
I was gonna bring up Crystal Skull earlier
yeah, the
because
okay.
I think Alex was talking about characters that don't grow and progress in their sequels, and Indiana Jones is kind of like it's sort of, it's an homage to those old serialized um, films of the 50s and things like that, right? And they're like the character himself, like it should be a character that any actor can play in my mind, even though Harrison Ford is so good at it. But the character of Indiana Jones, to me, he doesn't really exist outside of the hat, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You need an actor who's able to perform the physicalities of the role in order for it to truly feel like Indiana. But if you're gonna make an Indiana Jones movie 20 years after you've made the last one or whatever it was, um, I don't know, like you definitely don't try to pretend that he's still the same guy. Like they don't really touch on his age except for like a few jokes here and there. I think Shia LaBeouf makes a comment about him being like 80 or something like that. But other than that, the movie tries to pretend that he can do all the death defying stuff that he's normally done, and he can fight the heavy and all this kind of stuff, right? Um, the trouble is like the actor himself has has trouble keeping up to that, and it's fairly evident. I think if that movie were Indiana Jones recontextualized as, an older relic hunter or something like that, and then you had younger actors taking up the physicality, that would be a much better way to approach it. But yeah, as it is, it's just like you're trying desperately to capture the magic of Indiana Jones, and your lead is just not really able to perform to the level that you're asking of them. Or maybe that's just really ageist. I don't know.
that's a really interesting point too, where I've never really thought about it, but with the way you were explaining Indy in the original trilogy, he is kind of a placeholder character where like he has personality, but only to a point, because it allows the viewer to project onto him and kind of insert
Yep.
themselves in the
Hmm.
role, which I think that's a really, really interesting point that I never actually considered. He's kind of the Link of 80s action movies.
Yeah, that's right. He's he in terms of like RPGs, like a video game, like he's your silent protagonist essentially, and you're
Yeah.
just inserting yourself into in a certain way. Yeah, like he's got a kind of an attitude, but we don't learn anything about what makes Indiana Jones tick. We know that he doesn't like snakes, and we know that he thinks relics belong in the museum. That's kind of it. And that's all we really need to know. Like we just like he he's got his these two ideals, and that's kind of it. And we don't learn too much about his history or family life or whatever. And even in what is it, the Last Crusade, like I don't think we really get a big arc between him and his father. Like I don't think there's much of like a journey between the two, other than like they have a nice moment at the end, but there's no sort of like a resolution of any past grievances or anything like that, right? And we don't need that because that's not what the movie is about. It's about adventure.
All right. Well, we're closing in on the hour mark, which is where I usually try to like to wrap up. But I do have a quick side game that we're going to do here because there have been a lot of Lego sequels that have been announced because of successes from movies like Top Gun and Avatar. And Lego sequels tend to make money regardless, at least in the opening weekend, because people are excited to see these characters come back. And then, like in the case of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, we see increasingly large drop offs. But we have a bunch of these announcements, and I want to get your guys' take. Like, just is it hot or cold? Are you excited? You're like, oh god, no, please? So,
Sure.
as we're recording this today, it was announced that there was a cast for the lead of Lucius in Gladiator 2.
No.
Gentlemen, how are we feeling about this one?
Yeah,
I don't remember who Lucius is.
I heard about the Nick Cave hell script, and anything short of that is just disappointing to me. So
Unless they're gonna
Yeah.
do the leaked script where he's playing Maximus throughout history, being involved in every major battle, and then head of the Pentagon, I am not interested. That is a true leaked script that they were close to filming from in like 2009.
Yeah, that's a go big or go home script right there.
This was a comment I was having with my partner before we started. Can you think of any movie that is overdue for a Lego sequel? Like something that was very good in the last like 6-7 years or longer even, that you're like, they're gonna end up doing this. Can you like sort of as a guess, can you think of any that are prime candidates? Because I could come up with one,
Yeah, that's a great question.
which is Mean
Ooh,
Girls.
Mean
Ooh.
Girls. Yeah.
They did make they made
I
a
bet we're
direct to video
gonna-
sequel of that.
Yeah, I think they're gonna do a like Lindsay Lohan's cleaned her shit up and Tina Fey needs a win, and we're like 5 or 6 years away from a Mean Girls
That
like
could-
a
Romy
sequel.
and Michelle 2.0.
yeah. Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
I am mildly interested in a Beetlejuice sequel just
Mm.
because I listen to a lot of show tunes. Well, okay, to be fair, my wife does when she's painting miniatures for our D&D games. And we were both like telling the music program to skip Beetlejuice because it can't be good. And finally one day we relented. And I love it. And if they can capture some of the zaniness and fun of of Beetlejuice in the musical that is so good by being irreverent to the first movie, by making a sequel in the spirit of the musical being irreverent, it would be really good. I could see that. Yeah.
Yep. Into it.
As kind of an aside to this, I was recently watching Lindsay Ellis's Nebula video on ET, discussing why we don't really talk about ET anymore and how it hasn't really gone the way of like people attempting to franchise it in any particular way, as far as like subsequent films and things like that. So yeah, really interesting watch if you're on Nebula.
For me, I think a sequel I would be most interested in would probably be a sequel to Dread.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're a comic book based podcast, and I think Dread is a movie that really kind of deserves at least one more shot at showcasing what they had with Carl Urban in the role, because I think Carl Urban did a fantastic job with that, because he did not care about showing his face. He was more invested in the role than he was getting his face time, which is one of my biggest complaints about like any Spider-Man movie, because Spider-Man has to lose his mask because he has to be able to emote during the fight. Where Carl Urban did so much great face acting, I thought that was really good. But that actually
Yeah, but you could see half of his face though, to be fair. Whereas Spider-Man's got a
little,
full
but
mask.
yeah.
and Marvel kind of cheats where they gave him the Deadpool eyes, but they say
Right,
they're
yeah.
mechanical to help him focus and whatever. But I mean, people deal with the eyes, because like one of my biggest complaints about the Transformers movies and the upcoming Rise of the Beasts is the studio and the designers of the Transformers, for whatever reason, really need to have Optimus Prime have a mouth. Why? You just have the faceplate move, and you know he's talking.
So he can eat.
It's Peter Cullen talking. You know, I guess. Yeah, fine. He needs his hot dogs or something. I guess.
Yeah, he's
It's
got
hard, yeah.
for
Energon is
kissing.
really chewy.
So that for all the
Now that's something I would pay to
They
see in
can't-
a
you can't have
Transformers movie. Is
ships
Optimus
where they
Prime
kiss.
making out with someone?
Oh no.
Yeah, speaking of like new approaches to IP, yeah, like make Transformers a romantic comedy. I'd watch the shit out of
We
that.
briefly got that with Bumblebee.
That's yeah.
After watching The Shape of Water and then seeing that like first trailer for Bumblebee where she's in the water and like Bumblebee is too, I'm like, I think I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before. That I'm like, Josh, is she gonna make out with that car?
No, it's just an homage to Mac and Me. It's fine. Oh, Mac and Me. Can I say that's my answer for a movie that needs a legacy sequel?
No,
legacy sequel.
stop it.
Oh,
Bad.
can you bank a whole movie on ironic internet cred?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, only if you cast Paul
Like
Rudd in the
meme.
role as the grown-up kid.
Exactly. Yeah,
That would
you
be
gotta have
amazing.
him.
You have to have Conan O'Brien somewhere in there.
So other upcoming legacy sequels that they've mentioned, I'm just going to burn through these now
Sure.
because I think that conversation was better that we just had. But like
alright.
they've announced that Constantine 2 is in development now because Keanu Reeves is having his renaissance. We've got Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny
No.
coming out later this year. Sherlock Holmes 3 is announced. There's nothing set in stone, but they're like, hey, maybe we're probably going to do it.
No,
Maybe not. National Treasure 3.
maybe. You guys are supposed to be answering
Expendables
too,
4
by the
is
way.
still in development
Yeah,
somehow.
Indiana Jones is probably the only one so far that I think might be worth my time.
Expendables 4, which I don't know how they're still making these.
No.
They're really they got to crank it up to Fast and the Furious levels for that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rush Hour
No.
4 is confirmed with like Jackie
Wow,
Chan and Chris
no.
Tucker.
Oh,
both-
really?
Yeah, they both have confirmed that they're back for this.
No.
Okay,
What?
so
And then this one-
literally I haven't watched. I when they came out, I love those Rush Hour movies. I don't want to watch them again because I feel like it would make my skin crawl.
Oh, that's kind of one we didn't talk on. I don't know if it's technically a legacy sequel, but like Lethal Weapon 4 kind of falls in that same boat too, where like they aged out of the roles and they're like, let's still have them do the big fights and all this stuff. But the last one on my list here is The Karate Kid, which is slated to come out in 2024. Apparently, it's going to be called The Karate Kid again. They're following Scream and all this stuff. And then Sony, not Tony. Sony, per the Hollywood Reporter, has said it's set in the Karate Kid movie universe. It's not going to be set in the Will Smith's son's universe. And it's described as, quote, the return to the original Karate Kid franchise, which like what
But
the
they're
hell
already doing
has-
that.
Exactly.
And the weird part is the Cobra Kai creators, showrunners, have said they know nothing about this.
Wild.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
It's subterfuge. They just
Yeah,
don't want people
left
knowing
hand
they're
doesn't know
involved.
what the right hand's doing. That's yeah.
It sounds like something Sony would do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, like there's no greater studio at completely mismanaging IP. Maybe Warner Brothers, they can duke it out. Sony
Yeah,
and Warner Brothers.
Warner-
Warner Brothers is fastly approaching Sony levels.
Oh man.
Yeah, we never touched on Space Jam 2.
No,
but
no.
No, that movie doesn't exist.
Yeah,
That
that's
movie
right.
is
I don't
like
wanna-
pushed.
I don't want to talk about Space Jam 2.
Yeah, that movie has pushed Kingdom of the Crystal Skull back into my zeitgeist. Like, I'll talk about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Do not bring up Space Jam 2 to me.
The one of the South Park Paramount movies, they mentioned that like, listen, we went through some weird times during the pandemic. We pretended Space Jam 2 was a good thing. That was the best joke that I'd ever heard. Because I completely had forgotten that movie had come and gone, and I went and saw that in theaters. I think. No, wait, did I? No, wait, they released that straight to streaming, didn't they?
Yeah, that was day
Oh,
and date
thank God, I
streaming.
did not see that in theaters. I remember seeing it opening
I
weekend.
think I was home alone sick that day, and I just ended up watching it to see what it was. And my God,
I definitely couldn't imagine risking COVID for Space Jam 2.
Yeah. Break your lungs for wrapping pigs.
Or your kids' health. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's meant to. I
exactly.
remember going to see the original Space Jam with my dad, and that was a good time. But like, I could not imagine dragging my kids to see that movie in
Oh
theaters.
yeah, okay, yeah. All right, I've re-looked at my stubs. Yes, I saw that at home because the first movie I'd seen during the pandemic was when I rented a theater to watch the James Bond movie No Time Left to Die.
Nice.
That was worth it.
That's one of those movies like The Kingsman where I'm like, that came out in like 2017, didn't it?
Oh man, The Kingsman. Can that count as a legacy? If you
No, it's just a regular money grab sequel.
yeah.
But they teased Hitler at the end. Come on, we need a sequel for that one.
Oh boy.
They're supposedly filming the third one of that one sometime this year.
They actually greenlit that? Or no, you're talking about like the
Yeah, the
Eggsy
Eggsy movies.
the Eggsy part of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
series. Okay, well, hopefully that one's better.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck was Channing Tatum doing in that movie? There was no point to having him in that movie.
And Pedro Pascal.
Well, Pedro Pascal, I mean, he at least did
Yeah, that's
something.
true.
But yeah, so let's start winding down there because it's getting late and we have to be gracious hosts and not keep Liam and Greg here too much
But
longer.
I like them.
They've got I like them too, which is why I listen to their podcast. Which Greg and Liam, feel free to plug that again, as well as your socials.
Yeah, for sure. You can find I Have Some Notes at ihavesomenotes.com. You can find us on Twitter at I Have Some Notes and on Instagram at I Have Some Notes Pod. Yeah, come talk movies with us. We regularly let our listeners know what movies we'll be fixing next and put out calls for your own fixes, and we read those on air. So yeah, we love audience participation. So please do that.
Indeed.
Yeah, and then feel free to share your personal socials as well.
My Twitter's nothing anyone needs to see.
Nobody-
Look up I Have Some Notes.
Oh, fine.
If you want to see
next
me and
movie
Greg
is-
complain about Alberta politics, follow us
Yeah.
on social. Otherwise, I have some notes.
All right, fine. The next movie you guys are going to be working on is Old,
Mhm.
which I have not seen, but one of my favorite viral videos that I've seen is there's a moment where there's a guy in the background and he moves so unnaturally that you cannot tell if he's a real actor or if they just CGI'd an actor into the background. And like, I don't know what scene it is because I haven't bothered with the movie. But
that might be a metaphor for the dialogue and acting in Old as well.
Oh, you just reminded me of the movie Dark Shadows. That really terrible Tim Burton Johnny Depp movie from like 10 years ago. There is a scene where there's a warehouse on fire, and I remember watching the movie, and they're, of course, they're panning the crowd, and some people are talking, and I tap my wife on the shoulder, and I go, "That's a cardboard cutout of firefighters," because they hadn't moved at all while spraying the hose. It was like a matte painting.
Extras cost money.
I was like, is this intentional? I can't tell. So bad.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell with Tim Burton, especially modern Tim Burton. But let's start closing out the show here.
At least Wednesday was good.
Yeah, which he was just a producer on for the most part. I think he directed the pilot.
4 episodes.
Anyway, you can follow me on Twitter at Josh_Scar, which again, like kind of like Liam and Greg, if you want to just see me complain about politics, but sometimes interact with the I Have Some Notes Twitter, you can follow me there. You can follow the podcast at Talking Smack Pod, where Alex kind of controls that from our basement or from my basement. And I will usually do the interacting with people. Alex will just share the news. Please join our Discord. We have a link in our link tree. Lots of fun conversations happening. We have a meme channel, all sorts of fun conversations with comics, movies, all the things we talk about, other podcasts as well. Thank you to Leo Allen for our musical themes and Beppo for our avatars, as well as Retro Ale Studios for our Ricky avatar. Please subscribe, rate, review the podcast. Please follow Liam and Greg, or at least please follow I Have Some Notes, because it is a wonderful podcast. I describe it as Cinema Sins, but with guys who are not complete assholes talking about these movies and to do good things with the movies. So thank you everyone for listening, and take care. Watch Star Trek.